Welcome, everybody. Welcome, students. Welcome, everyone, to our panel, Teachers of Tomorrow. Good to see you. Some old faces, some new faces, students and staff and faculty. Welcome, my City College School of Ed community. It's great to be with all of you today. Anyway. Welcome everyone to our conversation with the Teachers of Tomorrow Club and the man who made it possible, Dr. Leonard Lewis. This came about because this is our School of Ed centennial, and being part of the history committee, we decided to find out more about how the Teachers of Tomorrow came and where they may go. And now I would like to say a very, very big welcome to some very special people. I'd like to introduce you first to Edwin Lamboy, Dr. Lamboy, who is the Dean of the School of Education. He's going to grace us with some remarks. Thank you, Dr. Lamboy.
Thank you, Professor Brosen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Edwin Lamboy, Dean of the School of Education. I am delighted to be here. Thank you to Professor Brosen and Dr. Lewis for the invitation. I wanted to share with you that, to me, one of the best things that has come out of this terrible time that we're living right now, the pandemic, is the opportunity that I've had to learn about Teachers of Tomorrow. In the last year and a half, I've attended a couple of events, and I have learned about the impact that some of the trips, for example, have had on Teachers of Tomorrow. The opportunity to spend time together and learn together has been really meaningful for this group of School of Education students. I've also had the opportunity to confirm, because I knew this, the impact and the role that Dr. Lewis plays on Teachers of Tomorrow. About your guidance and your compassion and your desire to make students feel as part of the School of Education and grow as much as possible. I really value and appreciate that, Dr. Lewis. So to me, the celebration of the School of Education centennial and the story of the School of Education in the first 100 years would not have been complete without this specific event, because Teachers of Tomorrow is a very important piece of what the School of Education is. So everybody, please enjoy. I'm looking forward to learning more, especially about the past of Teachers of Tomorrow. And I'm delighted to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamboy. We remove the pin so we can move on. I would like to introduce you now to, hold on, there we go, to the Assistant Dean of Enrollment and Student Services, Stacy Apusey, who we all know and love. So here she is.
Thank you. Good evening, colleagues, TOT club members, students, and guests. My thanks to Professor Brosen for extending an invitation not only to attend tonight's event, but to say a few words about my interaction with the Teachers of Tomorrow Club. It is my absolute pleasure to share this tonight as we explore the club's past, present, and future, a nod, I'm sure, to the college's seal of the three faces that look to the past, the present, and the future. Again, my name is Stacy Apusey, and I am the Assistant Dean for Enrollment and Student Services. Part of my responsibility is to manage the office, to manage the School of Education Office of Admissions and Student Services. In that role, I see students at different stages of their career, that is, freshmen, transferred, student teachers, graduate students, or returning students. I'd say my first real interaction with any teachers club in the School of Education was somewhere around 1994. Yes, I said 1994, when the School of Education dean asked me to meet and talk with the club president to share the work of the Office of Student Services. Now, in that time, the Office of Student Services included field work, it included student teaching, graduate admissions, career placement, and advising. And that I was to assist in identifying resources for students that included scholarships. It became more than that, however. The relationship between club and School of Education was to establish a connection to students, not just by rote, but a connection full of intentional give and take. Over the years, in one form or another, I have attended information sessions, met one-on-one with club members, and I've also sat in the hot seat at town halls where students have asked tough questions of the deans, including questions on advising, course availability, certification, preparation workshops. I say all this to say, though, that the voice of the club plays an important role in the School of Education. The club is not just a place for like-minded students to gather and have bake sales and talk, although I love desserts and I miss that. But the voice of the club helps to keep administrators like myself accountable for our actions and decisions. The club also asked some years ago that we consider their voice when policies are being created. For example, the passing of a certification examination was temporarily waived during the pandemic. And it is still, it continued for a couple of terms after that. But that was because during advising, students shared with advisors the difficulty they were having accessing Pearson sites. In late spring 2020, the Teachers of Tomorrow board members met with the School of Education deans to discuss the effects of the pandemic, remote learning, and a host of other topics. Know that I am pleased to continue the partnership and the alliance with the Teachers of Tomorrow Club members under the mentorship of Dr. Lewis. It is especially important that we are at the 100-year mark for the School of Education and that we move forward as a unit with all of our stakeholders towards the next 100 years. My best to you all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean Pusey, for your remarks. Now, as soon as I can find her, I'm going to turn the floor over to our own Professor Laura Gellert, who's the chair of the Department of Teaching and Learning and an associate professor in childhood ed and mathematics education. Here she is.
Thank you, Professor Brosen, for allowing me to speak. And I just wanted to say that I'm also here on behalf of Professor Yan, who's the chair of the Department of Learning, Leadership, and Culture. We as the chairs wanted to express our gratitude to the Teachers of Tomorrow Club. We find, from my experience with the Teachers of Tomorrow, it's that I found it to be a great resource, not only for students, but also for the faculty. When faculty needed to have something addressed, we could get in touch with the club that advocates for the students. And, that's when the town halls came up. These town halls that Dean Pusey mentioned were a place where students could have a dialogue with faculty, the dean, and it was a safe and respectful way for students and faculty to get together. I also want to reiterate the fact that I missed the bake sales and the smoothie stand. I really love the fact that Dr. Lewis's center was a place where the Teachers of Tomorrow Club could be and faculty could go in and hear what they were talking about and learn about what the club was planning and raising money for. So I just want to send good wishes for the future of the Teachers of Tomorrow Club and recognize the importance of it in the past. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing with us. Now I would like to introduce us to Dr. Andrew Ratner. Let me make sure I get his title right. He's the interim dean of this interim deputy dean of the School of Education. Did I get that right?
I believe you did. Thank you.
Hallelujah.
I forget myself sometimes. Great to see everybody. And I have to start by first saying how excited I am to see my ex-student, Matt Romano in the house, which great to see you, really. And I can't wait to get the update. But it's also a good segue into something I've been thinking a lot about with Teachers of Tomorrow. Dr. Lewis and I, as part of the assessment committee and just in general, I've really been trying to think about our School of Education as not simply a place that prepares teachers for the couple of years that they're with us and teacher leaders, but what is our engagement with candidates, undergraduates, graduates, from the moment they walk into City College to once they're actually in the field teaching, perhaps even teaching for many years. And that has really spurred us to begin thinking differently in many ways about programs, about certification, about dispositions. And that was very, very much precipitated by conversations we had with Teachers of Tomorrow, with folks like Matt. So just the fact that he's here already signals, perhaps a change in the air, and Teachers of Tomorrow spearheading that, and not only becoming part of the past history, but the future history when students leave the building as well, in terms of working and communicating with students who are currently in programs, in terms of alumni activities and many others which we have in the works. So I'll stop there. And again, great to see everybody.
Thank you, Dean Ratner. Always a pleasure. Okay, let me go back to gallery mode. And now we're going to watch a video that Dr. Lewis and I prepared for you about the history of the Teachers of Tomorrow. This was recorded and edited by our own Doris Grasabauer, our diplôme ingénieur, as she calls herself.
Yay, my academic title. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And please enjoy the show. Get some popcorn, everybody.
Can you see the video?
Yes, but we have some bars in front, a bar. or
Okay,
two.
hold on a second. That better?
Yes.
Okay, here it goes.
Dr. Lewis, prior to your involvement in the Teachers of Tomorrow Club, could you describe who was involved in working with the students?
Well, I became involved with the School of Education Undergraduate Students Club around 1999. Before then, Stacy Pusey, who is now our assistant dean, was the person most involved with the students, I recall. However, it was Professor Jim Newar who was instrumental in helping to formalize the meetings of the students into a club. And that actually occurred in spring of 2000.
How did the club get its name, Teachers of Tomorrow? And what were the goals of the club?
Well, I recall in spring 2000, Ms. Christina Maletta Della Tola, who was the president of the club at that time, came up with the name when the club had to be officially registered with the Office of Student Affairs. Student clubs are always designated as either an undergraduate or a graduate club because they came under different governance structures. undergraduate clubs came under the USG, undergraduate student government, while graduate student clubs came under the GSC, the Graduate Student Council. Now, at that time, there was not much debate about the name. We were more focused on organizing meaningful sessions for the students. It was only until later that we discovered another entity at the Department of Education in New York City was using the same name. Hence, now the need to conduct a name change for TOT. I recall that the goals of TOT were, one, to allow representatives of education students to have a voice in curriculum decisions in the education department. Secondly, to share information relevant to becoming certified and to prepare education students for their future role as professional educators. Third, to build a bridge from pre-service to classroom teaching. And lastly, to attract and retain students in the School of Education programs. Now, to accomplish these goals, students engage in a variety of activities, which I will be describing later.
Dr. Lewis, you stated that one of the goals of the Teachers of Tomorrow Club was to provide students access to information. How does the club go about doing that?
The TOT Club helped to fill that gap in several ways. First, by holding information sessions with key personnel from the School of Education Administration. For example, the club invited Stacia Pusey to the information sessions where she informed students about the steps they should take to ensure they completed their program on time, answer questions about required courses and the different measures. Also provide information about degree requirements, scholarships, and questions related to the School of Education and CCNY academic policies. Then when Dr. Bruce Billig was appointed Director of the Office of Clinical Practice, Dr. Billig and Norris Rodriguez or other staff members were invited to speak about student teaching requirements and the process. It was important for students to know when they were to student teach, how many hours were involved, and the expectations for fulfilling this critical requirement, because they need to make decisions about their work if it impacted their jobs. Information on job opportunities and field experience requirements were also made available at these sessions. I myself also provide information about certification exams and the seat, information on what tests were required and what preparation materials and workshops were available. Now, over the years, other faculty members also became involved with the club, including Professor Catherine Franklin, Bruce Kans, and later Professor, you yourself, Professor Randy Brosen. Secondly, the TOT Club organized panel discussions with former graduates. I recall that the first panel involving School of Education graduates occurred in the spring 2000. In fact, this was one of the first activity organized by the Teachers of Tomorrow. In the panel session hosted in 2003, the panelists were Ms. Linda Cruz, who was a 1995 School of Ed graduate, Ms. Daphne Childs, a 2000 graduate, Carol Burgess Harper, a 2000 graduate, and Ms. Arlene Chan, who was also a 2000 graduate. These sessions were very popular because students were very eager to hear what their colleagues, who were now actually classroom teachers, had to say about their actual classroom experiences and if they felt prepared. What is interesting is to see that some of the same questions that students asked then are the questions they even ask now. For example, what do you recommend us to do? Go straight to the master's or to start exercising our profession and then think about the master's later? Also, can you offer creative solutions for implementing lesson plans for a school that has a designated curriculum asked for Department of Education? Third, is it true that once I am hired in a particular region, that I'm locked into that school district region? And if so, what is the procedure to switch regions or districts? And lastly, what are some of the support programs that are in place for first-year teachers? Also, even before the Office of Clinical Practice was what it is today, TOT on several occasions invited recruiters from the New York City Board of Education to meet with students for information sessions about transitioning into the teaching profession. These sessions were organized on several occasions until the Office of Clinical Practice included the DE personnel into the student teaching orientation, and then it became unnecessary to continue. This early success of the TOT Club was even recognized by the Office of Student Life when 14 club leaders, including the current TOT president, who was at that time Ms. Lauren Morrow, were selected to lunch with the president of CCNY, who at that time was Dr. Gregory Williams. The clubs were selected because of their focus on improving academic excellence on campus. And this early recognition actually helped the club to secure funding for future programs and activities.
How did the students decide what programs and activities they wanted to have?
That's an interesting question. Actually, in 2004, when the undergraduate education students were asked in a survey what type of programs they wanted the club to be involved in, it was clear that having more access to the right information as early as possible was the highest priority. According to that survey, the highest priority showed that 86% of them wanted access to information on School of Ed programs. 76% wanted information about education policy changes. 66 wanted information in 3 areas: information on teaching profession, information on certification exams, and information on access to resources such as the computer labs. What is interesting is while the least items that were a priority for these students at that time were: 1, getting involved in club activities; 2, participating in School of Ed committees; and 3, collaborating with other clubs on campus. Now, the fact that these were the least important needs for these students at that point was not really surprising, given that most of them were at the end of their program, and they were therefore anxious about being able to complete their program in a timely fashion. But as we responded by making efforts to recruit and engage students earlier, even before they formally were admitted into their program, as a result, students became involved earlier and for a longer period of time. This certainly helped students to change their perspective about TOT and how they engage in the club. In fact, they began to really appreciate and value additional experiences in their professional preparation beyond just the academics.
I learned that students sometimes took the initiative to organize training sessions to address a dire need. Could you give an example of when that might have occurred, Dr. Lewis?
Yes, actually, there were occasions when students felt very strongly about an issue and requested more support to augment their preparation. I remember in the spring of 2010, just after the ETP assessments were introduced, students voiced concern about the assessments being used in the public schools. They themselves, as new teachers, wanted to feel more comfortable about those assessments. And so the TOT Club applied for and received a grant of $1,200 from AEC, the Auxiliary Enterprise Corporation, to conduct a training session. The persons invited to conduct these training sessions included Ms. Hazeline Anthony, who at that time was an AP at PS 135, Adam Clayton School, and also an adjunct in the leadership program. Ms. Sanjay Neufeld, who was also an AP at MS 244, and an adjunct also in a special ed program. Also Miss Odetta Santiago, who was a teacher at the Nyack Middle School. Now, these seasoned professionals, they organize a hands-on training workshop for students and therefore help to expose them to the authentic classroom assessments. They felt much more prepared after the end of that session. Also, other student-led initiatives were town hall meetings and open forums. I recall that during the, when Mary Driscoll was dean, they initiated a School of Ed forum that focused on the ETPA review because they were so anxious about the ETPA assessment at that time.
What were some of the ways the club collaborated with other groups on campus?
Now, I think I may have mentioned that one of the benefits for collaboration among student clubs was to obtain funding for club activities. Clubs did receive points for their efforts to collaborate or when they offered campus-wide programs each year. And so in the fall of 2005, when Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita ravaged Louisiana and other states on the East Coast, including New York City, the TOT rose to the occasion and organized fundraisers to support campus-wide efforts to respond to this national disaster. In fact, the TOT fundraiser at that time was entitled Penny Pincher. They also joined other clubs across the campus to support the Cohen Powell Community Engagement Fellow, who was the organizer for Water for Schools project. And she was raising funds to support a nonprofit organization that was engaged in building wells in communities in Africa and other places where access to clean water was very much needed. What I recall earlier also was that there actually was a graduate education reading club, and Miss Marion Mills was the advisor of that club. TOT collaborated with that club in reading sessions also, and that occurred, I believe, around 2002. In 2013, TOT organized a dining etiquette workshop, hands off the table, with Miss Joyce Connelly Simmons. Ms. Simmons was the organizer for the CCNY role model program on this campus. And in fact, several members were also participants in the role model program that was co-sponsored by the New York Coalition of 100 Black Women. Halloween time also was a time when the club members had their own Halloween parties, they had lots of fun, but they also made time to join with the Office of Student Affairs and other clubs to transform the space in the NAC into an area with fun activities for school children in the community who were also celebrating Halloween.
Dr. Lewis, the Teachers of Tomorrow Club has really helped many of our students develop a sense of community. What do you think has contributed to this reality?
You know, that's an interesting question because I believe that students needed a place and a space to socialize, to unwind, to have fun. They found that in the TOT meeting space as they played games, planned activities, worked hard in their fundraising activities. It was truly a learning experience for many as they learned to work together, to assign responsibilities, and to pick up the slack when someone else fell short. They were learning to build a community of learners and leaders. And this is extremely important, particularly for the community campuses, where there are fewer opportunities than residential campuses for them to interact outside of the classroom setting. It helps them to hone their skills at planning, organizing, and executing. I recall that in fall of 2018, the TOT invited the New York State Coalition of Concerned Legal Professionals to organize a screening of the Central Park 5 here on campus and in the NAC space. Eric Siff, who was one of the attorneys who successfully appealed the New York criminal case that won the release of the 5 innocent youths who were wrongfully imprisoned for a crime they did not commit, he was on hand to answer the sobering questions at the end of the screening. Now that powerful discussion at the conclusion of the screening left the audience sober, informed, but very much aware of the disparities in the justice system. Actually, several TOT members reciprocated by volunteering their time at the Legal Aid Center that is located in the Bronx. And they assisted the organization's ongoing efforts to renovate their office. TOT members also engage in cancer walks and aid walks in the communities to raise funds and to bring awareness of the seriousness of these health issues and to encourage the public to take them more seriously, particularly in the minority communities. TOT members also engage in children's health and fitness expos in 5-mile classic races. They were truly engaged in community activities outside of the classroom. They also collaborated with the Men-Teach program. I'm always amazed at how the students themselves sell the Men-Teach program. Not only do they speak highly of it, but many TOT members are also part of that program. In fact, many of them took the opportunity to travel with the TOT group on the Cape Cod trip. They also engaged and shared information about tutoring opportunities, particularly the Practice Makes Perfect tutoring program. That program is highly regarded by our students, and many of them have worked with the company in various roles while they were in school. In fact, through the efforts of Matthew Romano, Practice Makes Perfect made a significant contribution of $1,000 to the club when it was raising funds for the Cape Cod trip. It was very much appreciated. But then Winter Wishes, in the fall of 2015, members of the TOT club participated in the New York Cares Winter Wishes program. Now, this is how Angeline Malinga and Elizabeth Pina described it. They said that the TOT club is a club that prepares future teachers like us to be the best at what we are passionate about. We offer a wide range of activities that aim to help the members engage in various enrichment activities, workshops, seminars, and much more. One of the goals of Teachers of Tomorrow is not only to provide support to its members, but also to the community. In the fall of 2015, we actually participated in an event called Winter Wishes. The Teachers of Tomorrow Club partnered with New York Cares, a company that aims to meet pressing community needs by mobilizing caring New Yorkers in volunteer service. They were able to work together with this organization to make some children's Christmas wishes come true by responding to their letters to Santa Claus. It is the support offered to members and the services we provide to our community that distinguish the Teachers of Tomorrow Club. Caring and pushing for a better tomorrow is our goal, but creating a family is what we do.
Could you talk a little bit about the campus trips that the Teachers of Tomorrow organized and how they came about?
I'll just mention 2 of the trips that the students made, and they will share their experiences about the others. The first off-campus trip was organized actually by Lisa Yu, and Lisa was president of TOT in 2010. She and the board and other members of the club worked tirelessly to plan activities for the club. As a child and education major, Lisa thought it would be a good idea to expose her peers to off-campus educational experiences. And since many of them had not visited the Washington Mall before, Lisa, who was full of life and full of energy, worked with the TOT members to organize the trip to Washington, D.C., and this actually was in 2010. They organized and held a number of fundraisers to raise funds to offset the cost of the trip for the students. So eventually, about 24 TOT members and friends went on that first trip to Washington, D.C. They visited the Washington monuments and the Holocaust Museum, which was quite an engaging educational experiences for them. And the students definitely benefited from that experience, which added to their own professional development. Interestingly, in the following year, 2011, Lisa and the TUT members organized yet another trip, but this time to colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. This trip exposed them to parts of this country's history they were not aware of and motivated them to learn more about. Now, these experiences help students recognize the value of being involved in off-campus educational trips. Now, students will share their own experiences of their trips to Boston and Cape Cod later, but I must mention of the recent visit of a group of TOT members to Wave Hill on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. This was yet another educational experience for them to relax and learn how to incorporate art and nature into their teaching. The experience was quite an enjoyable time for them as they spent time with Randy Brosen, their instructor. And finally, the TOT Homecoming event, which was held last spring in 2021, exemplified the type of close community TOT has become. And maybe it was the fact that many of them missed the opportunity to physically meet as they normally would and spend time together. But the occasion saw a special group of students, both current students and former TOT graduates, work tirelessly to craft a program that, although it was virtual, it gave them the opportunity to use their skills and interests to create an enjoyable and relaxing experience, which we all appreciated. It was really a fitting way for them to close the academic year and to once again celebrate a special moment among the memorable programs TOT has created over the many years to enhance the lives of students in the School of Education. It was indeed a special occasion for all. Well, thank you, Professor Brosen, for that very interesting beginning of the look at the history of the teachers of tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to ask the members of the current board of Teachers of Tomorrow to introduce themselves. I'm not sure how many are here.
We don't have Tamina and Esmeralda yet,
You don't
but
have.
Esther and Anisha are here.
Yes.
Okay, so could we have Esther, who is the vice president, introduce herself, and then she would take over from there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esther Antonetti. I have the pleasure of being vice president for this year for the current board of TOT. And our president, Tahima, isn't here, but she's also our president, which is working with us for this year as well.
And then is Anisha here?
Yes.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with everyone. My name is Anisha Figueroa. I'm the treasurer for this year at TOT. Esmeralda is our current secretary, but unfortunately she couldn't make it today. So we're just keeping her in good spirits.
Thank you, Anisha. All right, so these are some able students who have risen to the occasion of being the next board that would be spearheading the plans for Teachers of Tomorrow. It has been a tremendous experience in terms of the change in how they plan programs. They usually would congregate in 3226. That's the meeting space, and they love the one-on-one interaction. And so it has been a challenge to be virtual. And we have been giving them all the support they need to continue the work of creating programs that are to the benefit of all of the School of Education students. But as I said earlier, that the two trips that I wanted the students themselves to be talking about is the trip to Boston and the trip to Cape Cod. And so we have a few people here who will tell us about one, how they started, to how did they decide on that first trip to Boston, and then they'll talk about their experiences on the Boston trip. I think there's a PowerPoint which I will share as they describe their experiences.
Cool.
All right, so the first trip is the Boston. I think we have, what do we have? We have Emma. Is Emma here?
Emma is here, but Elizabeth isn't here yet.
Oh, Emma is here. Is Sonia here? Yes, I think Sonia is here.
Sonia is here.
Sonia? Sonia's here.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, yes, Sonia. Sonia, were you the president at that time? Were you the president at the time when you went to the Boston trip?
Yes, I was the president at that time. Hello.
Hi.
I was, yes, at that time I was the president, and Ange Malanga was the vice president. I had Elizabeth. I had Matt also there assisting. They were all
Shireen.
Yes, Shireen too. Anissa, all of them, they were so great. During our Boston trip, it was amazing because when I got recruited into TOT, I just happened to change majors from engineering to teaching. And I happened to come upon Miss Dr. Lewis's room, 3226. And I'm like, I needed like a quiet space to study. And then I had Stephanie and TJ, who were at that time when I was first starting the education department. They're like, do you want to join TOT? And they were like, I was like, okay, why not? They also needed some members. And at that time, we just became, I think I became the secretary during that time. They're like, we need some members. We need some members for TOT. And then after, when it was my year, I became vice president and became president. And then we switched roles from president to vice president. Yes, and we decided to have spring break Boston, if we can go. We collaborated with Dr. Lewis, and during that time, there was another teacher who gave us access to a school. I forgot.
Bruce Cans.
Yes, her. Bruce Cans. Yes, he gave us access to someone he knew from that Montessori school. And I think it was a Montessori school, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an interesting connection with City College, Sonia, because I think that the person who either started the school or teachers at the school actually came from the workshop center at City College. The workshop center was one of the most significant places in the history of School of Education. It produced a lot of progressive teachers. And so this is one of the schools that was created by one of the persons graduates from the workshop center, the Mission Hill School in Boston. And so it was on his recommendation that he asked that you visit that school. And so talk about the experience at the school.
At the school, we were able to listen what their goals were for the students. They also gave us a chance to go into their classrooms and observe their teachers and their students and how they learned in a different type of progressive way. How compared to over here in New York, how it's just go by the Common Core, the standards that we have to follow. And over there, it was like the kids have a project, they do it themselves, and the teachers are just there to like guide them when they need help. But of course, there's also like some teaching and everything. And it was a great experience to go there. Yes.
Right.
We were able to visit a couple, the children's, I know, I'm so sorry, Dr. Lewis, if you went back, the Children's Museum, I was like looking through some pictures, trying to look for them. It was a great, because even though it's a children's museum, we were there acting like, not acting like children, adults, enjoying ourselves, seeing all these different activities that can be put into work in the classroom too.
Right.
Yes. And we also went to the Paul Revere house. Yep. A fun fact, after the American Revolution, Revere opened a hardware store, a foundry, and eventually the first rolling copper mill in the United States. It's actually one of the, I think it's a museum that you could get a stamp from the passport too, if you have your national parks passport, which is great. Yes.
Okay. And this is some of you having fun at the.
Yes. We were at the Airbnb when the planning, it took a lot of planning to do this trip. And it was our first time planning for a trip together with Ange and Shireen and all the other TOT members. And there was so much planning to do, because when we had to go from one office to another office to get that funding also. And we had to get permission slips, because I know a couple of our TOT members at that time were under 18 or were at the age of 18. Right. Yes. So we had they had to sign, they had their parents had to sign, and we had to put in these papers so we could get our trip approved. Right. And we had to show that it is educational for us, so we can learn something by going to this trip. And we also had to do an itinerary. We had to plan for a food budget. Emma was our at that time
the chaperone.
Yes, our chaperone and our food budget person too, who she kept us with what ingredients we will need and how much food we will need to feed 20 of us. I think it was 20 of us during that time, or 15. I think it was 10 to 15, because we had to have even a maximum of people going into the trip. We couldn't have less than 10, but we had to have at least 10 people going. Yes. And that's also when we collaborated with Menteach. They also went on this trip. A couple of their members went on from Menteach, went to this trip. It was a great experience, and it was a fun experience. And we made connections too, long-term connections and friendships.
Right.
Yep.
And what about Emma? Do you have any reflections on your experiences on the trip to Boston?
Definitely. I think actually my involvement in the TOT club was the highlight of me working at the office, because I came in not only as a student but also as as an employee, so working with Dr. Lewis. So just kind of being called upon in that way to be a part of the camaraderie of what TOT stood for was meant a lot to me. Some of the highlights, you know, just like when Sonia has any questions, she's able to just walk into the space and just like, hey, Emma, like, I was thinking about this, you know, what's your opinion? And you know, kind of have me do my little research to get back to her, you know, with an answer that worked for the group was very fun. On the trip, I vividly remember trying to like figure out, like, you know, as she mentioned, like how much money do we need to feed people? Because we have all these, you know, students that are trusting us to not just give them a stimulating experience so that they can learn, but kind of like also needing to eat at the same time. And, you know, it was very interesting, very, very interesting. And also just being able to see how everyone in the club was receiving the information that they were getting access to, especially when we went to the Montessori school. Just kind of like being able to see how the kids scaffolded, you know, how the kids were able to consume learning material, you know, while the adults merely just kind of like they scaffolded it, you know, and they got a little bit of a look into what their futures might look like as well. Yeah. For me, it was definitely more than the trip, because when I was there as a student as well and as a member of the club. And I actually got a chance to participate in some of the collaborations that TOT had with other groups. I was able to participate in the role model program that Professor Connolly spearheaded. And actually was a recipient of the scholarship as a proud member of TOT. I was also able to learn a lot of tools and from, especially from just watching Ange and Sonia organize this trip. You know, tools that I was able to use during my time there to actually form my own club as well. And you know, it was super fun to be able to collaborate with TOT as one of the executive members of a separate entity in CCNY. You know, it was a very interesting dynamic to be in as a member, as a office assistant, and as a chaperone as well. So it was just very, very fun to witness as well.
And where is this place here that we all are gathering here?
That is in front of the Airbnb we stayed at. Yes, right by the steps.
Right.
I remember we even had like a meeting during the while Emma and I were like preparing the food.
Yeah.
We had like a discussion of our daytime. Like how was the school, because we had to like come back and we had to do a minute meetings for of what we learned, what we observed, and
Right.
what we can do to further and better ourselves too. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Emma and Sonia.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
It was a very unique experience to be able to travel from New York to a totally different state and
Right.
kind of and just see how schools run there, see how students are taught, get a totally different perspective from other teachers, you know, and just be able to have that opportunity in itself was amazing, because very rarely, a lot of us, I would say for myself, like just coming through a system, it's like New York is the only school system I will ever know if I'm not able to go out and experience something
Okay.
else as part of my college experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. And now the second trip, which was to Cape Cod. And I think Matthew is here, right? Matthew Romano is going to talk about the Cape Cod trip. And the first question is, why Cape Cod?
Yeah, well, yeah, I actually prepared some notes on this. So let me, I believe our first question was, how did the club decide on the trips to Boston and Cape Cod? So I'm going to actually steal some of Sonia's spotlight and try to speak to both of them and my relationship with both trips. So firstly, that Boston trip, to take us back, I was a relatively new member during the planning stages of our trip to Boston over the spring break of 2018. I joined in September of the previous year, so September of 2017. And at the time, I just looked up to and on at the board members, Sonia, Ange, Liz, Shireen. And I noticed their discussions gradually shifted in tone from relaxed to a little more intense, and from casual to fastidious. My interactions with these planning discussions went from at first just innocuously eavesdropping to actually gawking on in awe and excitement at what they were actually planning, thinking that I would actually be a part of this trip. Finally, it became a place where I was actually brought in by the board members, by Sonia and Ange and the rest of them, as an equal and valued contributor in these discussions. And for me, as just a member, that meant so much, because it told me that, or it confirmed to me rather, that TOT was a place where there was a level playing field, where as just a member, I wasn't any lower in rank or lower in value or lower in importance or lower in contribution than Ange and Sonia, and that my voice was valued and that my presence was seen. And that meant a lot to me. And so, to make a long story short, by the end of that spring, I was committed to running for a position, actually at the encouragement of Ange and the others. And then by September of that same year, I became vice president. So that it just means a lot to me to be able to recap that. So now I'll talk to Cape Cod, which was the real question. So in a few short months after becoming VP, I think me and the rest of the board at the time, so that's Anissa, that's also Antara, who unfortunately isn't here with us today, but she's pictured in all these photos, Rosalie and Sadia. We were still getting our feet wet in terms of gelling as a unit, and getting the ball rolling. And so we were bewildered at the prospect of planning our own spring break trip. We didn't think we could exceed, let alone even match, the precedent and the expectations set by the previous board's accomplishments. But rumors began circling that there were strong familial and childhood connections between one professor in particular, Dr. Nancy Cardwell, who's really the VIP of this trip, and her connection to Cape Cod. And so those rumors began circling from Dr. Lewis to us, and soon enough to the TOT membership at the time. And, you know, to this day, I think I can still cite the planning of that trip, which went from probably the winter, so like November, December of 2018, up until the last days or even hours before we actually went to Cape Cod in the morning on the spring break of 2019. I can still cite that entire experience, that span of maybe 6 months, as one of the most challenging but rewarding things I've ever done in my life. And mind you, for those who don't know, I just recently entered my first year of teaching. and I can still say all that. There's no quick way to really sum up the sweat, the tears, and Dr. Lewis, you know this, the sleepless nights, the long meetings, and the countless phone calls and conversations that we've had with contacts inside and outside of CCNY that went into planning this trip. So, it went from rumors circling about Professor Cardwell having connections to Cape Cod and us Googling immediately what Cape Cod was and how we could actually go there, to this actually being a thing that surfaced in 6 months of that work that we put in, the work that Professor Cardwell put in, which can't go unaccounted for, the work that you put in, Dr. Lewis, and really everyone else involved.
I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the input of Professor Cardwell. I think that is what was so exciting about the trip, because of the meticulous planning and connection she made with the schools and the museums and the places of interest on Cape Cod. So tell us a little bit now. I know you're excited to tell us about the places that you visited, but I must mention, I think I did say this in the video, that your connections with Practice Makes Perfect was very important, because at the last minute we got some help from past, and it was through your influence that we got that donation of $1,000 from Practice Makes Perfect to make this trip. So that was very, very important, and we applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Tell us about the places that the group visited.
Yeah. So we really, and Dr. Cardwell's planning genius sort of helped us to craft this experience. But as we were planning, we really paid attention to getting a sort of gallery view of every place, everything, every experience we really could draw from Cape Cod. And we soon realized that schools, which seems, on the surface to be the place you would go to, the first place you would look when you're learning about teaching or in pre-service teaching, we quickly learned that schools were not the only place where that learning could happen. And so we realized that going to schools and going to a few different schools, touring an elementary school campus all the way up to a middle school and high school campus, at perfect change of the slides, Mashpee High School, Hyannis Elementary School, the Quashnet School, and the Kenneth Cole School. We learned that touring different schools and speaking to different people in the schools, even speaking to, I think, the superintendent, or the assistant to the superintendent, which, for us at the time, I think we didn't really understand what that meant. Or at least as a junior in college, 2 years away from teaching on my own, I didn't quite understand the gravity of that moment and what it meant to actually sit in the room with a superintendent. That, it didn't even cross my mind. And now, 3 years later, and, with my own, aspirations of perhaps being in that position one day, or, having heard about from the grapevine superintendents of my district or other districts, the moment starts to realize itself now, as that was pretty impressive and pretty important for pre-service teachers to have the opportunity to do, especially in a place, in a district, in a town, in a state that we didn't belong from, that we were simply visitors at. And so we learned the weight of these conversations, and we're continuously learning, I think. And that's when I think the special thing about this trip is that the learning never really stopped. we continue to learn indirectly and unconsciously the weight of these moments. You know, meeting with the Native American tribe, the Wampanoag tribe. At the time, we knew it was a big thing, right? We were told of the gravity of that moment. But having, you know, gone through 2 more years of college, having entered my first year of teaching, and having learned more about the actual realities of these Native American tribes, having actually spoken to the trauma that these tribes still carry and the language being stolen from them, essentially. Having these conversations with my children brings me back to this trip in a special way, in that it confirms to me, you know, my thoughts that these were moments that were once in a lifetime. And so I think it's special that this learning continues unconsciously, but over 3 years, I've realized moments that didn't seem so special to me then, didn't seem so impactful to me then, just seemed like parts of a long trip, to actual moments that defined my pre-service teaching and my college career, and will continue to define my in-service teaching. And so that these pictures speak to some of the other experiences we had. We learned that, you know, as I said, schools aren't the only place where learning happens. You know, even being able to go to a museum, the JFK Museum, and hear from the directors of their education department to see how education impacts, and the world of education and the contributions of teachers, which in City College, I think we are a very special group, but we are admittedly a small group. We're a niche in City College. And so when you are a pre-service teacher in City College, you don't quite understand, you know, the family that you're really a part of as a teacher, and that the impacts that teachers actually have on the world, other than we're going to go from pre-service teachers to in-service teachers one day. That was the pipeline, right? And so being able to see how teachers contribute to framing and creating the JFK Museum, a wildlife sanctuary, heritage museum, really opens our eyes to what teaching is, to where teachers are, to the work that teachers do. These are pictures taken from
Sorry about
some of the
that.
highlights. Professor Falk invited us to a barbecue at her house. And so, you know, even being able to have these conversations in the house of a professor in that intimate space, which allowed the club to bond in a way that I had never really seen before. And also to hear firsthand from a professor that some of us didn't know, or only knew from a distance, was really, it was really impactful, to say the least.
Is anybody else here from the trip? Is Vanessa? Is Vanessa?
Yes, please help me out.
Vanessa. Oh, please. All right, I don't think Vanessa is here.
I don't see Vanessa.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh,
yes, Anissa.
Sorry, I just got home.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Anissa.
Yeah, I just wanted to stop by.
Thanks a lot. Anissa is actually, well, was actually the president of TOT. Was that when Sonia was?
No, Sonia was the president and I was 2018 to 2019, I believe. And then Sonia was 2017 to 2018.
Oh, you were after Sonia.
I was after Sonia, yeah.
Great.
She was
great.
after.
Yes. And you went to both, right? You went to both the Boston and the Cape Cod trips.
Yes, I went to both.
As
Um,
a fact, I think I must give you credit for all of these pictures because you were the one
oh,
with the camera and that was your role, not just as a president, but you were the one always with the camera and always taking pictures and so the pictures are you must be credited for all of this good work. So tell us about your reflections of what you experienced about the trips.
well, first I want to like just compliment the club itself. I was just thankful for this group. I transferred from a private school doing a medical field nursing program. And after I transferred to City College, I was just welcomed by Teachers of Tomorrow. From Sonia, I think Angie's here as well. They all welcomed me. And because I was completely clueless coming to the education program in City College. And Teachers of Tomorrow just helped me, guided me throughout this journey. So I just want to compliment the passport, I guess, and just the welcome community and TOT. But these trips, they were also rewarding just because I did see all the different schools from other states, like Boston. It was really cool because I took notes on like the schools that we went to. I think it was Mashpee High School. I loved how everything was hands-on. Oh no, it was Barnstable High School. Got free shirts from. I still have my shirt. And I just love that experience going. That was my favorite school out of all of them was that school. I loved the school there. And it was another elementary school that we also went to. I like how they incorporated like hands learning, and there was like these like cool interactive like hallways where the kids can like jump off like footsteps, which was really cool. I don't know if I have the video for that. That was really cool. I think it was Hyannis. Yes, Hyannis. That was really cool. Or maybe it was Kenneth Cole. It might have been Kenneth Cole. It was a smaller school, I remember that. Oh, I also love the libraries there at the school as well. Those were cool. Yeah, it was just a really nice experience talking to the administration there, getting to know a little bit of the curriculum there. So it was really cool to experience both trips. Yeah.
Let me go back to this. I think you have this. This was the slide that we took. This picture you took when we were at one of the restaurants. I think when we were actually leaving. I think, or it's probably one of those. But I wanted the group to have a taste of what it was like actually at. You did mention Beverly Falk, and so I think there is one short clip on Beverly Falk's place. Let me see.
It's so quiet.
And that's you.
Want to move back the table? We just leave it as is. No, Zoe. I'm so tired. I'm sleepy now.
I kept looking up. I was like, I kept looking up.
Okay, let me ask you something. If I walk, I have to go to the bus, the car anyway?
You go, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Cookies.
Oh.
The cookies.
We can put it on the table.
We could, yeah, we'll get it. I think we'll get it. We don't want to do it here. We'll do it some places.
We can put it on the table. You're playing cards. Okay, put them on the table and then later. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. She's like a mom. She's like a grandma. Grandma first thing. Oh, Beverly. Beverly. She looks like a Beverly. She does. Rosalie is such a sweet name.
Oh, yeah. I think in the big piles.
Video.
That's why I give them the big piles.
So that was the end of a very interesting visit to the Cape. And as an outcome of that trip, I think most of, if not all of the students who participated in that trip, I think one of the things that we all agree with was that the experience that they had is something that more students should have. And so as we talk about what next, now that we have had some of the experiences in educational trips, what's next for the club? And so we want to just, but before we even talk about that, I want to first thank all those students who participated, all those students who shared, all those students who contributed to this discussion. We do appreciate all of that, what you said, all of which you have done to make this club so special. Thanks for sharing those insights and those experiences that I believe all of our students should have. What we want to do is to talk a little bit about what next. And there are a couple of things, and I would like you to share your views on what next, based on all of these experiences you've had in the past. We have current board members, we have current TOT members, and we have past members. And so this part is about what next. What's the future of TOT? And I would like you to draw on one, your experiences you've had in TOT. That's one. Second, I would like you to draw on the fact that now virtual experiences is more prominent and is probably part of the future of education. Maybe not so much at the elementary level, but perhaps also, but primarily at the college level. I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about part of what Professor Ratner mentioned earlier in terms of not looking at your experiences as ending when you graduate from School of Education, but how could you maintain that connection with City College so that you continue professional development, learning experiences, all right? So let's talk about that for a minute. Specifically, what are some of the activities you enjoyed most, and how did it benefit you, and how do you think it could contribute to your future professional development? And I'll just open the floor for you to respond. I'll do a gallery.
Hi, Dr. Lewis. This is Ange.
Ange, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I apologize for not being able to respond sooner.
Okay. I did try to say what you said in that brochure. I would have liked if you said it yourself, but I think they were so profound words of what you think of TOT and your experiences in TOT, and with specific reference to that winter that winter project, Winter Wishes project that you did with New York Cares organization. But tell us about
that was
Go ahead.
So the Winter Wishes project was something that we did when Sonia was the president, and actually the year before, I believe. And it was an amazing project because we were able to kind of get what the kids what they wanted for that Christmas. And we were able to raise funds and provide that for them. And it was amazing to see the pictures that they sent back. And also very fulfilling that we were able to give back to our community at the time and, have that solidarity, TOT coming together and making sure that we're able to provide these little gifts for friends at New York Cares. But also in response to what you were saying about how TOT has impacted my life as a teacher right now, like networking is a big one because actually like sometime in May, I believe, my class was having issues with behavior, and I was able to pull people from Teachers of Tomorrow and have an intervention program and develop an intervention program to help an anti-bullying campaign. So having access to people and talents at TOT is amazing to continue to have, so that we could easily, make have these skills from different people and use it to our advantage.
That ties into something that I think you and Matt have been working on, and that's a TOT alumni. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about, you and Ange want to talk a little bit about what your idea was all about?
Yeah, sure. So
Go ahead, Matt.
Of course.
I'm
Let
driving,
me see if
sorry.
I can share my screen. Disable participant screen sharing. Would it be
Give me 1 minute.
possible to share my screen?
Yeah, just a minute. Darcy is going to.
Now you're possible to share the screen.
Great, thank you so much. Let me see if I can get this open. Sorry, as I'm preparing all this and my million tabs as a teacher. Here we go. Because hopefully you can see everything here. So yeah, I think it was one of our previous meetings where all the TOT alumni members and some of the faculty met. And actually during that meeting, something came up which struck a chord in me and made me think about creating this network for alumni, connecting all of our alumni together in a meaningful way, and hearing about the work that you were doing, Dr. Lewis, and trying to get board members from years before Ange, who I didn't have the pleasure of meeting until these recent meetings, including this one. Your work in bringing them back into the fold inspired me to think about how can alumni stay connected as TOT. And so that was the thought. That was where it was birthed. And I immediately actually texted Ange during our meeting and asked about, could we possibly, and this is a thing between Ange, we'll constantly during meetings just send a text to each other to check in. And so I texted Ange and asked, is this something that we could do? And she was totally on board and said, let's do it. And so that's really where this conversation started, in trying to build together a network, build together an association for TOT alumni to stay connected to TOT. Over the past few years, in talking with the current board and the most recent board, and sort of reuniting with that group in a way that was powerful to me, I learned very quickly about some of the struggles TOT was going through, not only in having to deal with the move to a virtual space, but also with funding. And that's an issue not only for the Teachers of Tomorrow, but all clubs and CUNY as a whole, in fact, over the past 2 years of this pandemic. And so that sort of furthered the conversation, and how can alumni be brought back in a way that's purposeful, not just in a way of, hey, let's talk, but in a way of, hey, let's help. Hey, let's contribute, let's do some service. back to TOT. And so Ange and I started getting the ball rolling about discussions about an alumni association. And that's actually the time at which this intervention around bullying that Ange brought up sort of surfaced in line with these conversations. And so here on this slide, I just sort of bulleted some of our statement of purpose, which we drafted a few months ago. And so this is obviously very rough, and it's something that we plan to really build. And, you know, we're only 2 people. And so we plan to build it and fine tune it as we talk to more of the professors and faculty at CCNY and CUNY as a whole, really. So the first one is to assist in funding the TOT undergraduate clubs and activities and opportunities, providing a mentorship program for prospective teachers enrolled in the School of Education, opportunities for TOT alumni to host student teachers, providing community support for professional development sessions. As Ange said, networking and community service opportunities for current TOT board members and TOT members as a whole. And so that's the bullying intervention program is just one way in which we've started to think about how to do that, and exclusive perks and benefits. And I think the main tenet of this for me right now is creating that bridge. And you spoke to this early, creating that bridge between pre-service teaching and in-service teaching. So that the 3-4 years, as I spoke about, the realizations that I've had over the past 3-4 years come quicker for pre-service teachers, that their road to in-service teaching becomes more clear as they're in their sophomore, junior year of college, that they really see that path being crafted with somebody else, with the help of a mentor who, you know, has been in the position of a teacher for a few years and knows exactly what that road looks like. And so with all this in mind, and I think this is the next thing you wanted us to get to, and so I'll take that a torch for you. The next thing in mind is with these discussions regarding the creation of an alumni association, with our endeavors that transcend the walls of CCNY and into New York City's public schools and educational spaces, as well as some copyright conflicts that have come up and confusions between our club's name and other organizations that actually have the same name. And I think, Dr. Lewis, you can speak to some of the specific organizations, but there are other organizations that share our name. This has led to a discussion or proposal, I should say, about a formal name change. And so we sent out a Google form a few months ago to TOT members, both past and present, to vote from a list of possible alternatives. And those votes have been tallied. And so I'd like to share those results now. And so with 40 responses only, which is a little bit disappointing, but good for TOT's numbers, good for getting current and past board members together and voting for this. The current vote stands at, you know, a sort of overwhelming percentage for Teachers for a Better Tomorrow, which is a sort of simple name change, but I think gets the job done. And we can confirm once again that that name hasn't been taken, but at the time of our putting out this Google form, it was a name that was safe to take. So yeah, that's where the formal name change stands now. And I think me and Ange are in agreement in that getting this more official, now taking this name change to the next step, and formalizing it across the board for Teachers of Tomorrow, and starting the process of adapting to this new name will allow us to work on this alumni association further. Our work has sort of been halted, not only by both of us actually starting our first years of, you know, new teachers, but also the name being changed allows us to further conversations as the Alumni Association under a new name, which is safe to take. So yeah, that's where Ange and I stand right now, and that's where the name change stands right now.
Great, Matt. Thank you. Thank Ange. Thank you, Ange. As usual, we're always calling on you folks for input, and it's always been a pleasure to interact. And that would be a wonderful segue into the role, the workshop center that Professor Cardwell is going to be involved in. The workshop center was a space on CCNY, an international space, international unit in the School of Education for many, many years, where teachers in the field can come back and hone their skills and get information and work out problems with current teachers and so forth. So I think there is actually a space that that would be dedicated to that. And so it would be a way how this group, this alumni association, can relate to the School of Education. So there will be a space where that interaction can occur. So we follow up with you, Matt and Ange, on that idea. Now, I also see that we have actually a past president from 2010 with us, Akia Gaudi, and she's going to tell us about, she's going to share with us how we could probably use some of her experiences, how we could use experiences of teachers who have been in the field for a while, their thoughts on how the teachers of tomorrow can plan programs that would be more effective in preparing our teachers for the future. Before I ask her to come on, though, I wanted to just mention also that one of the things we have been toying with, and I think it's something that you would agree ought to be done, is to include the CWE students in TOT. The CWE students are the undergraduate students in early childhood program, and they convene downtown in the downtown branch. And the reason why we haven't really interacted much with that group is because, of course, meetings were always held uptown and they're downtown. But I think being virtual, I think, gives us the advantage of bringing them into this space of interaction with the students at the main campus. So that's one of the things that we have been looking to do. Of course, it has some benefits and some implications. They are probably more experienced teachers, more experienced persons, so they have a wealth of knowledge and experience to bring to help shape the activities that you're involved in. However, many of them are working, and so we need to make accommodation for what is a convenient time when they would meet. But as you have already experienced, now that we are virtual, some of you have already started meeting on the weekends, so it may be quite convenient to bring them in at that time. But let's ask Akia Gaudi, who is a past president of TOT, I think 2010, to share with us her experiences in the field, and based on her experiences, where she is right now, and based on her experiences, what kind of recommendations would she have in terms of programming for TOT to make our teachers more effective when they get out into the field?
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, and good evening to everyone. First, I just want to start by saying how floored I am by all the amazing trips and accomplishments everyone has done since that time. It's just been really great to hear what TOT has been up to since 2010. So great work. I think this idea of reaching back, creating a space for former presidents and members to come back to TOT through an alumni association is great, because while we've been able to build a wealth of knowledge to bring to the classroom through this club, there's so much that we know now that we can bring to future educators. Many of the worries we probably had as first year teachers out the window now that we know what it's actually like, and in a way that can be reassuring to folks who are just like us when we were starting, to actually hear that, one, it will be okay, but to also hear what really is valuable in education, and especially in thinking about progressive education. nothing really prepares you like firsthand experience, but being able to do professional development, actually taking lessons and activities that you're doing with kids and being able to talk that through and give examples. I think that through other programming or through this association, the Alumni Association, there can be space to meet with current members and really workshop with them in a way that feels personal and meaningful, because we remember what that was like. A little bit about me is that I am now in my 10th year of teaching, although, you bat an eye and it goes by. And I also do a bit of coaching, and there's nothing like putting yourself back into the shoes of someone who's starting, because it also helps you to really focus on what matters. And so hopefully this is a space where we can also do that.
Great, thank you, Akia. Where actually are you now?
I'm currently at Bank Street School for Children, teaching math and science to 5th graders.
Okay. How did you get into that role?
So after CCNY, I continued my education. I decided to pursue another master's in elementary mathematics. Math was not my area as a student, a little hesitancy in teaching it, but that was something I leaned into and really wanted to make a better experience for my students than it was for me. And so through doing that work, it became a passion of mine. And I sought out more opportunities to teach math and science, but in a very progressive way. So really getting kids to understand math isn't just something to do, but that it's all around us in a language and a way of understanding the world.
Wonderful. I find it interesting that so many of our students, after they graduate, even with a child ed, being a child health major, when they get out into the field, they find niches that they can fit into. And many of you have actually become math coaches. Yeah, we do have math in the city program, and we do have programs here that focus on preparing math teachers. But I always find it interesting that several of you have eventually found yourself as math coaches and going into math and teaching math. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's great. And maybe it's something that we're doing at City College that is ensuring that you take that path and into math, because it is a field, it is an area that the kids need very much of.
Professor Gillett will be very happy to hear this.
Yeah, we have been having several conversations about that, as a matter of fact, and I think I have to kind of remind her that we need to do something more about it. But this is a good connection, because if we have a lot of our teachers who are actually becoming math coaches, this would be a good avenue, the Alumni Association, for us to connect with them and network with them and see how we can bring them into a space where they can impact the teachers that we have right now.
Yeah, another level of support and another level of expansion.
Right.
It really makes sense.
All right. Any other ideas about future programming for TOT?
I was actually gonna say, in relation to kind of like what Akia said, it brought into my mind, as someone who was a psychology major at CCNY, I never thought that I was able to be a part of a club that was within a department that was not what my major was. Ironically, when I first joined, I was like, I'm joining, TOT because it looks very fun. A lot of the time when we would have study sessions together, I was still able to, sit down and we still had general education courses that we were all still taking that were similar. So it benefited me in that way. But I would never thought that I would end up in a school teaching and subbing as a psych major, and so I think like that's the real that's where you get to see kind of like the result of just being exposed to different things through the club, and just kind of like having that camaraderie, and you know, like as Akia mentioned, just like not having something be your strong point, but still ending up, you know, a leader in that aspect. So I would just say, like, kind of like having TOT be accessible to students, not just in the education department, which it already is, but kind of just, you know, of all ages, you know, now like having it be accessible to CWE students that are not necessarily on the campus. You know, that has always been a goal of ours, and now it's a reality. So that's truly amazing, and it speaks a lot to the ambition of the club and the students in it as well.
Well, I'm actually glad you said that, Emma, because you remind me that Jomana, who was our past president last year, is actually an architectural major.
Yeah.
Now, how did that architecture major become president of TOT? And that happened because before she decided what major she was going to get into, she started to come, she was invited into the club before she decided what major she wanted to go into. She did have teaching in mind to some extent, but of course, you know, she was pushed in another direction, and that's a different story. But she actually was the one that the students selected to be the president. And even after she chose architecture as a major, she remained the president of TOT, and was made such a tremendous contribution, because that's the year, I think, when everything went online, everything went virtual. So it was a challenge, but that group did well as well, because the group before them had actually had a plan of having a visit to Washington, D.C. to visit some schools. They already had booked some Airbnb places that they had to cancel because of COVID. So she came in at that point, and then that transition, and she made the president. So hats off to her for that, and to you, Emma, for although you were, different majors, you still maintain that relationship with TOT. All right. Any other ideas before I see the time is going, so I wanted to see if there are any questions from the floor.
Dr. Billig?
Hi, everyone. So first of all, this has been really thrilling for me to sit and listen and watch and reminisce. And I thank you all for this activity. I always enjoyed speaking to TOT members when I was invited, particularly when you had a lot of good food. Just want to say that.
We all missed the bake sales too.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, when you talk about alumni association, I assume you want to look for a hook into the City College Alumni Association, and that where you actually become established as an entity. And I have an idea on that, which is, well, first of all, I'm a director of one of the directors of the Alumni Association. I am an alum of City Colleges. Some of you know. Professor Brosen, of course, is you're like a big shot in the Alumni Association.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not, she said. So, but I'm also the first vice president of the Education Alumni Group.
Right.
Which is part of the Alumni Association. I'm not a president, I'm vice president. Our president is Peter Goodman. And I really think that we need one or more of you to be on our board of directors of the Education Alumni Group. And I mean, I'm looking at some of you right now, but I say, oh well, yeah, Matthew's got to do that, And, but you know, you're a first year teacher, Matthew, and you're probably kind of busy with lesson planning, but let's take these opportunities. So where I'm going with this, I made several notes, but I just want to take another 2 minutes because, you know, it's time is going. You need to get, this is a tough word, like legitimized within the alumni association, alumni group. And so your voices could be more powerful. That's where I may not be saying it right, but I think you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
And,
I got it.
you know, I want to do everything I can to help that grow and support it, certainly. And we could follow up with Peter and Randy, if Professor Brosen probably
I'll
has
put in a good word.
Right. That's the other thing I was thinking about was, you know, do we know where all of the TOT alums are? We just heard from
Akia.
Thank you. You know, 10 years teaching. There must be lots of alums out there. We need some kind of way of putting together lists and information about all the alums from TOT, and then sharing that back with new members of TOT. And you mentioned like student teaching. You got to start with field work before student teaching. So so if they're going to do field work, they got to do 30 hours for one class. Maybe some of that time could be spent networking with an alum of TOT, and talking about it, writing about it, developing and so on, and moving forward and growing the program. So I think if you go with a TOT alum, in his or her classroom, I think that could be very significant and helpful to growing the program. Let me just see if I left anything out. No, I looked at my notes, and those were my big ideas for the moment. Thank you. And again, thank all of you. I was really stimulated by listening and watching the videos and looking at the photo albums. Well done, and it's exciting. And yes, networking is really important. As some of you know, I mean, I'm a former principal, and that's what we do. That's what we did, networking, because that's how we developed our own teaching staff. And someday Matthew's going to be a principal. I know it. So that means, Matthew, I'm not picking on you, but there are some other really profound alums right now from TOT. But I think what you have to do, I'm speaking to all of you, you have to come, you go back to City College and you get your master's in school building leadership as one of your degrees. Good. Think about that. I mean, that's something I did many, many, many years ago. My second master's from City College was in administration supervision. And you keep doing you do all this networking. And so I'm going to say, finally, the last thing I'm going to say is keep going to school. Keep getting degrees, getting certifications. So when the opportunity comes along to move to something and they say, well, are you certified in this or certified in that? And you can say, instead of saying, oh, I got to go back to school, 2 more years, but no, you say, yes, I am. I have that certificate. So I'm ready to jump in to this new phase in my career. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Bilek. Professor Dr. Cintron, we're so glad to have you. It's Doris Cintron is a former dean at School of Education. For those who aren't familiar with Dr. Cintron, and it's a pleasure having you. And certainly you have been such a help and support for the Teachers of Tomorrow Club. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Yes. Can I take a moment?
Yes, please do. Please do.
To my fellow alums, because I am an alum also of the School of Education. I got one of my master's degrees in guidance and counseling when that program existed.
Right.
and I am always very deeply proud of this student body and the work that we do at the School of Education. I am currently, for my fellow alums, so that you can see the trajectory. I am currently the Senior Associate Provost for Academic Affairs at City College. So I went from the deanship a bit further up and always with an eye on the School of Education, because it is where I cut my teeth and where I learned to be me, and I learned to lead and help everybody else along in this work that we all love, which is bringing up youth, bringing on strengths that we all bring, building up communities, social justice, and everything else that City College stands for lives deeply in the School of Education. But I want to take this moment to acknowledge Dr. Lewis for all the work that you do. What I heard today from these students echoes back to who you are as a person, who you are as a mentor, as a colleague, as a friend, the commitment that you have to each and every student that comes through that center, and to the faculty. You are at the core of the success of the School of Education in your very quiet, very modest way. And you have built us up and kept us strong. And thank you for that, for always being a friend and a support for me still. And you keep us honest in the way that you are, because it is who you are. And thank you for everything that you've given to these students.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Sencho. And those sentiments are very much appreciated. And yeah,
You have earned them.
we'll keep each other honest.
We do that.
We do.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing. Very important. Thanks for sharing.
Yes,
All right,
I
we
would
have
like to say, excuse me,
Yes.
Dr. Lewis, I would like to just say thank you to all the faculty and staff of City College School of Ed community for being here. Dr. Cintron, Catherine Franklin, Martin Rosenman, we have Henny Wong and Bruce Billig, Doris Grossenbauer is here too. We had Nancy Stern with us earlier. And
Amanata, I think, was here.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So,
Okay.
so we love our TOTs. Well, our TOBTs now.
Right.
So, see, I got it right.
Right.
Dr.
Okay.
Lewis, would you like to make some closing remarks, or?
Yes, I
you
would.
like me to?
I would. I would.
Okay.
I echo your thanks to the administration, the deans and the staff and the faculty for being here, and all the students who are here and who took the time off. I know some of you actually are on your way from school. Some of you are actually maybe at school still. So we do appreciate the time you took from whatever you were doing. Some of you may have even had to switch your schedule, maybe work schedule, not just to be with us. So we appreciate all of that. Two things before we part. One is the 3 individuals who won the prizes at the spring competition that we have. I think we had Jamana getting first prize, and that was at the We Are There Now event, spring event. We had a competition. We had a competition, and 3 persons won prizes. Jamana won the first prize, and I think Dean Edwin Lamboy won the second prize, and Megan Blumenreich won the first prize. Your prizes are in 3226. So you can pick up your prizes anytime now. And lastly, for all the members of TOT, the president, past presidents, and officers of TOT, I'd like you to put your name and the year you were in the chat. Put your name and the year you were in, the office you were in the chat, and your telephone number, and you will get a Centennial Prize for just being here today.
Is that for faculty and staff too?
TOT officers, TOT members. Put your name in the chat and the office you have. If you were just a member, put your name and your contact information, and we would get a centennial. For those who are unaware, this is the centennial year for School of Education. We appreciate all the work that you have done and the contribution you have made in terms of the students. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge that, we acknowledge your contribution. And so we will do that by making sure you get a Centennial Prize for the contribution you have made. One of the things we did in the past, which we will continue to do in the future, is to give the past officers certificates, whether they were presidents, vice presidents, or whatever office you held, and we'll continue doing that in the future. I was just reminded of that, and we'll continue to do that. But in closing, it is such a pleasure having all of you, and it is such a pleasure interacting with all of you. And so we want to make sure that we acknowledge all of you who are here, both the faculty, administration, and the students. And you are the ones that have made this evening such a pleasure, such a success. And we'll make sure to follow up with all of the ideas and recommendations and suggestions you have given to us today. So thank you, and have a good evening.